Vanessa. And what is the latest on Russia?
Well, Russia, the Middle East. So this is Sergei Lavrov in the last couple of days at the Valdai 14th Middle East conference. Strange statement from him, to be honest. But in part of it, he says attempts to remove Russia, China, and Iran from the process of externally supporting a Syrian settlement are hardly motivated by goodwill. I'm not quite sure why he would expect any goodwill from the West and their allies. And I've slightly paraphrased here. The West's intention is to push its competitors into secondary, less meaningful positions. Well, yes, you don't say, Sherlock, on that one. I mean, again, a little bit strange wording from him, but I'll put it into context. So on the 25th, Moscow sent Bogdanov, who's the deputy foreign minister, to Syria to meet with, effectively, a terrorist organization whom they were fighting against since 2015. And part of the conversation was the extradition of President Assad, who, of course, was only given humanitarian asylum by Russia, not political asylum. And rather than condemn Israel for the destruction of Syria, it appears that Russia is to be responsible for rebuilding trust with the Syrian people through concrete measures such as reparations, reconstruction, and economic recovery, although I would say the backers of HTS have the largest responsibility for the devastation in Syria, and that includes Israel. Both parties discussed mechanisms of transitional justice aimed at ensuring accountability and securing justice for victims of the Assad regime's brutal war. The Syrian administration reiterated its commitment to engaging with all stakeholders in a principled manner to build a future rooted in justice, dignity, and sovereignty. It stressed that any restoration of relations must address past injustices, respect the will of the Syrian people, and serve their interests. I won't go on and on about the ethnic cleansing that is ongoing and that was not condemned by Lavrov or by Bogdanov during his meeting. And I'll just finish on what was said in the meeting. Russia is considered to have a meaningful role in achieving transitional justice, but that includes, as I said, the extradition of Assad and senior security and military officials in Russia, and to cooperate with tracking down and prosecuting those still at large globally. So effectively, HTS, and of course that means their backers, are pushing Russia now to betray their allies for the last decade, and one could go back, of course, much further than that, back to 1946. Dmitry Peskov, the presidential spokesman, had no comment in response to these claims, which again is slightly worrying. And they're looking for Russian support for the positive, or Russia is supporting positive developments. Again, there is no condemnation of the ethnic cleansing being carried out by a still proscribed terrorist group. So fascinating, but clues are all around us. So this is back from 2021, and recently leaked documents show that Russian firms, basically Ross Electronics, which is a subsidiary of Rostec, which is a state-owned defense conglomerate, have done deals with Saudi Arabia since 2021, going forward into 2026, which includes, obviously, air defense systems, $2 billion worth. Again, the clues might be in the fact that, of course, in my opinion, looking at the facts as they now have them, there has been a lot of criticism of President Assad's pivot towards the Gulf states. But in my opinion, what we're now seeing is that Russia was very much encouraging Assad to do this, to pivot towards Saudi Arabia. Sometime in 2024, Assad asked the Ansarullah government officials or ambassador to leave Damascus on the basis that Saudi Arabia would provide them with humanitarian aid. That humanitarian aid never came to fruition. And now suddenly we see the HTS Foreign Minister Shaibani, who of course was interviewed by Tony Blair at Davos, welcoming back the Saudi proxy government ambassador to Damascus. So, in other words, Saudi Arabia is getting its footprint safely back inside Syria with the help of HTS and potentially Russia. And this, again, we talked about the fact that Russia potentially abandoned Syria for a deal with Trump over Ukraine. And in the last 48 hours, this headline came out in Reuters. Saudi Arabia and UAE seen as possible venues for the Trump-Putin summit, where they will discuss Ukraine and future energy cooperation. So very interesting shift in regional balance at the moment.
Thank you, Vanessa. So let's move on to Ukraine then.